Hey guys, I might start doing more lineup reviews, but definitely passionate about this one. I'm on the left here, finished in the money in a GPP, 540th out of a little bit over 3,000 people. This is the three entry max $15 on FanDuel, and my process has been up and down. From the standpoint of exactly what I'm doing, I changed to more of a cash game player over the last couple of years, while also, of course, taking tournament darts and tournament shots. But I don't love the cash options as much on FanDuel, and that's where I've been playing since I've been writing my articles on FanDuel. So I've really just been playing tournaments and staying afloat. Definitely profitable overall this season, but not 100% where I'd like to be. Last week got stuck a little bit too much in my process, and I think making these videos moving forward can be beneficial for myself and then maybe for others. This week in particular, I decided to only make one team, and that's what you see on the left. Whereas other weeks, I will make multiple teams, maybe upwards of 10 to 15. But I do have a problem with kind of getting stuck with the all-in thought process. That's what hurt me last week. Is I made all my builds around Russell Wilson, knowing that he would be a little bit contrarian in that Rams game, and that intrigued me. But I didn't diversify and give myself exposure to the Bills and Cardinals. Anyways, to this week specifically, um, going into the week, and I always put this at the top of my articles, my favorite games were the Falcons at Saints, the Lions at Panthers, and the Patriots at Texans. Well, at the end of the week, that had changed a little bit because, we knew the issues with Drew Brees and what was Taysom Hill going to bring as a quarterback, also being the obvious play at tight end. The Lions were completely banged up, and then Teddy maybe wasn't going to play, and then ultimately didn't play. So, my favorite game, and I talked about this on my video I made on YouTube, was the Patriots and the Texans. I believe I said it was specifically my favorite game, but it definitely ended up being my favorite. So this team on the left here had the money to play Deshaun Watson and Keenan Allen instead of Cam Newton and Julio Jones. And if I had done that, I would have finished third place and won $1,000. So pretty tilting, but definitely want to use this opportunity to try to improve, talk myself through it, and kind of talk through it. So, first let's look at what I did. I loved this Patriots and Texans game, and I definitely have wanted to attack the Texans defense all year. Um, and the thing that kind of got me with the Texans was their left tackle was ruled out this morning, Sunday morning, as well as Stephon Gilmore coming back for the Patriots. I didn't like either one of those for Watson, even though he's a baller, even though he was at home, and even though the matchup was fantastic, like I talked about in my YouTube video. So because I only made one team, I ended up going Cam, and this is a situation where I definitely wish I would have made a couple other teams. But would I have stuck with this exact same build and just switched out Watson and Allen? I can't 100% guarantee that. So it's coulda, woulda, shoulda. But my thought process here was that I could, because like I said, I could have played Watson and Allen and won $1,000, finished third in this GPP, and that would have been Watson naked. As you see, I would not have had any of his pass catchers. Um, that was the same thought process here for Cam. Even though I loved Damian Harris and I was all about playing him and he ended up being fine, I thought Cam was playable as well because Cam has been Kyler Murray to a certain extent with his rushing upside when he's been on the field, when he hasn't had COVID. I think he has 9 rush touchdowns himself this year. I definitely thought he would find the end zone against the Texans. And you see he did it through the air, 365 yards and a touchdown. I just needed a little bit more from him. But I think the biggest egregious error, because I love my team, I love everything that I did, or I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. So that was the thought process, was that 2 Patriots could get me home. I loved James Conner from a contrarian standpoint. He hadn't had a good game in a couple of weeks, but the Steelers were great favorites against the awful Jaguars playing Jake Luton. So I love the Steelers defense. I wanted to pay up for them. That worked out. Connor worked out. Basically getting home without scoring a touchdown, getting vultured by Benny Snell, which was tilting, and we know that that's a possibility. But Connor did his thing, and that's what the thought process was. I obviously wanted exposure to Justin Herbert, and I thought that because Herbert, you see the winning lineup here on the right, because Justin Herbert was more expensive. I thought that there were ways to get around that, and so Mike Williams was a good tournament play, scored a touchdown, ended up working out. I wanted, at the end of the day, I still wanted exposure to the Lions and Panthers game somehow, some way. And I didn't want it from the Lions with how banged up they were. I talked about it in my video, what Matt Rule and I think it's Joe Brady have done with the Panthers. And I was kind of waiting to lock this team in until we saw what happened with Teddy Bridgewater. But I decided, you know what? Regardless of whether it's Teddy Bridgewater or PJ Walker, I want exposure to the Panthers because the Lions defense has been so bad, and a cheap way to get it was Curtis Samuel. And a big thing for me was the fact that with Christian McCaffrey off the field, and of course, I think if you know me, you know I love Curtis Samuel. With Christian McCaffrey off the field, Curtis Samuel does have dual threat upside. He had a rushing touchdown in back-to-back games before McCaffrey came back against the Chiefs. So he could get it done in multiple ways. Obviously, he didn't have that, but we also know what he could do. I talked about, I think on my video, that Samuel caught all 9 of his targets for over 100 yards and a touchdown against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, even with McCaffrey playing. So we knew the dual threat upside. We knew it was a fantastic matchup. I wanted exposure. He was cheap. I knew he would be low owned. You see 3.6% owned. That ended up working out. Taysom was a lock, and I didn't want to overthink things with Dalvin, knowing that I could afford him. He obviously ended up being a great play. So obviously, my egregious errors are, again, if I play Watson and Keenan Allen instead of Cam and Julio Jones, I win $1,000, and I wish I would have done that. I was on Keenan Allen all week. I mean, I think Keenan Allen is probably the best wide receiver play on the whole slate, and so I overthought it. I allowed having an extra $100 to be able to afford Julio get in my head. But part of it, too, was the fact that I obviously still did like the Falcons and Saints game from a fantasy standpoint. And I started thinking, even though Taysom Hill is a locked-in play, is he going to be an efficient quarterback? And he definitely played a lot better than I thought he would. I thought it would be more of a Tim Tebow situation where he would have 80, 90 yards rushing, 150 yards passing. And I thought, if he's not very efficient, that's going to allow the Falcons offense to have the ball more, and one of these pass catchers can get off, and we know that Julio has GPP winning upside when things hit. Well, he gets hurt, which is part of the equation here, but obviously at the end of the day, you see Keenan Allen just went stupid against the Jets that had just allowed Jacoby Myers to go stupid. Their slot corners put on IR. They're the awful Jets. I want exposure to Herbert. And do I want to just sit there and have it with just Mike Williams? So all of those questions should have caused me to say, no, look, don't be dumb. Whether I play Cam or Watson, I should be playing Keenan Allen regardless. And I think this is kind of the process where it's like Taysom Hill is a cash lock. Everybody's going to play him. Dalvin Cook, I know everyone's going to play. Do I want Keenan Allen as well? And it's like a quarter of the field had him, but I still had Mike Williams, who's 8% owned, Damian Harris, 7% owned, Cam, 6% owned. If I would have played Watson, he was only 8% owned. Curtis Samuel, 3.6% owned. I would have gotten home even with a little bit higher owned receiver who was a fantastic play, who I could have afforded, who made all the sense in the world based on the spot. And what, I think that, not playing Julio Jones over Keenan Allen was my biggest mistake. But playing Cam and saying, I can play Cam naked, that there is still a negative correlation between Cam and Damian Harris, because I know Damian Harris doesn't catch passes. And I truly thought that there was a chance that the Patriots offense would have 4 touchdowns overall, and Cam and Damian could account for all 4 of them combined. But I liked the Patriots and Texans game so much, I still could have played Watson, knowing that you can play Watson naked because Watson is a mobile quarterback. And Watson ended up having over 30 rushing yards and a rush touchdown, which allowed him to get home in addition to his passing stats, not even playing a Texans pass catcher. And so I think that that's just something to note. I think that's why FanDuel is a little bit easier, because we really just need to account for the best spots and the teams that are going to score touchdowns. And if you have a mobile quarterback, especially if you're playing in a tournament size that's only 3,000 people, you don't have to force a stack. You can make a team that you know you love, that makes all the sense in the world. And as long as you know you have a couple of contrarian pieces, and for me, that was Curtis Samuel, Mike Williams, James Conner, Damian Harris, like that was enough to get home no matter what. It wasn't enough to beat this first place team you see over here on the right, but it would have been enough for me to finish in third and win $1,000. And I came 2 plays away, and both Watson and Allen were guys that I wrote up and guys that I really liked, and guys that when I was just kind of playing around with builds all week were top of the list. So obviously this is a week I wish I would have made multiple teams like I usually do, because things could have ended differently. But I also think that, the single bullet kind of forced me to determine what I think the best plays were. And ultimately, this is what I landed on. And I came 2 plays away, and 2 plays that I liked a lot. And so hopefully this is helpful. I mean, I think it's more therapeutic for me, but my process from a top-down standpoint led me to this point, because I wanted Patriots, Texans exposure, and I got it. I wanted Panthers exposure, and I got it. I wanted Chargers exposure, and I got it. I wanted Vikings exposure, and I got it. And I wanted Steelers exposure, and I got it. So it came down to, the Falcons make sense because I don't know how Taysom's going to play, and this could end up being, fantasy friendly. Whereas I could have just said, I want more than one Charger because of how good Herbert's been, because of how bad the Jets are. And ultimately, if I would have gone down that path with Allen, then maybe I say, you know what, let me pay up for Watson just in case he's a little bit more, if everything hits, he has a little bit more upside. But I ultimately decided I thought that the Texans defense was worse than the Patriots defense, which ultimately is only one part of the equation, right? Because the other part of that equation is, well, what can you do for me as a player? And Cam Newton has tons of upside. I wrote about it. But when you're playing both Damian Harris and Cam Newton in the same lineup, that's taken a little bit of steam out of your sails, taking a little wind out of your sails, because both of them are going to get the majority of their upside on FanDuel with rushing touchdowns. And we saw Damian Harris get one, which could have got me home. And I should have game stacked it and ran it back rather than sticking with just one side of the equation. Those were my 2 big mistakes. But overall, I put myself in a position to have a chance because of the top-down process determining I want players from these certain spots. It definitely hurts because I think this was a situation where there was no Kyler Murray, there was no Russell Wilson, there was no Patrick Mahomes, there was no Rams, there was no Buccaneers on this main slate. So I definitely think that it was a relatively straightforward slate, and I think I got a little galaxy brain with the Julio Jones play, because he's really not somebody that I ever go to, especially on FanDuel where it's touchdown oriented and he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. So I literally just, because I didn't hand build in my notebook, which is mainly my process, because I made the lineup on my phone. I sat there and said, oh, well, I can afford Julio. That's kind of interesting. I already have Mike Williams. And it's like, yeah, but Herbert's about to go dumb. You're not paying up for Herbert because you don't feel like you have the salary. So you could have played Watson, who has a ton of upside, gotten the Herbert upside, and then played Williams and Keenan Allen, and basically what would have been playing Justin Herbert regardless, because we know that the Chargers offense runs mainly through those 2, especially when their running back situation is so banged up and Kalen Ballage is the starter. So came close, not happy about it. But hopefully this takes you behind the curtain a little bit, and hopefully we can learn from this and we can hit it big in the future.